You were never against the room. You just never fully believed you were supposed to be in it. You learned early how to show up without settling in. You got good at presence without attachment. You could sit at the table, follow the conversation, laugh at the right moments, and still feel like you were watching it from somewhere slightly outside. Not above it, not better than it, just separate from it. That feeling never went away. You thought it would. You thought the right job would fix it, the right relationship, the right group of people, the right chapter. But every new room felt like the last one. Familiar, manageable, but not yours. You stopped saying that out loud a long time ago. Because when you tried, people told you that you just needed to open up more, try harder, put yourself out there, as if belonging was a skill you hadn't learned yet. But you had the skills. You were never the problem in the room. You just never stopped noticing that you didn't quite fit it. You noticed it in school. The groups that formed naturally around you while you stood slightly adjacent to all of them. You noticed it at work. The easy camaraderie other men seemed to fall into without trying. The inside jokes, the shared references, the way a room would loosen up when certain people walked in. You watched that happen. You understood it intellectually. You just never felt pulled into it the way everyone else seemed to be. And the strange part is, you weren't unhappy exactly. You had people you liked, conversations that mattered, moments that felt real. But there was always this background awareness that you were operating slightly outside the frequency everyone else was tuned to. You stopped trying to explain that feeling. Not because you gave up, because every time you tried, the explanation came out wrong. It sounded like a complaint, or loneliness, or arrogance. And it wasn't any of those things. It was just an observation you had made about yourself that turned out to be permanently true. Most men in your position learn to perform the fit instead. You know what that looks like. Laughing a little louder than you felt. Agreeing with things you didn't actually agree with. Staying in conversations that ran out of substance 20 minutes ago. You did that for a while. And then you mostly stopped. Not dramatically. You didn't announce it. You just quietly pulled back from the performance. And people noticed, or they didn't. Either way, it didn't change what you did next. There's a specific kind of quiet that a man carries when he spent decades being present in rooms that never quite claimed him. It's not sadness exactly, it's not resentment. It's more like a low-level awareness that most of what's happening around him was built for someone else. The conversations, the milestones, the way people bond over things you never found interesting enough to care about. You watched other men plug into all of it easily. The career ladder, the weekend rituals, the group identities. And you never understood what they were feeling that made it seem so natural. You kept waiting for that feeling to arrive in you. It didn't. So you built something else instead. You built a life around what actually mattered to you. Fewer people, deeper conversations, more silence, less performance, less obligation, less pretending. You made your world smaller on purpose. Not because you were afraid of it, because you finally stopped apologizing for what you actually needed. Here's what's actually happening beneath all of this. Most people build identity from the outside in. They find a group, adopt its norms, reflect its values back, and that reflection becomes the self. That process is efficient, it's social, it works for most people, but some men's nervous systems don't do that cleanly. They can observe the group, participate in it, function inside it, but something underneath keeps flagging the mismatch, not as danger, not as rejection, just as information. This isn't quite right, this isn't quite me. That signal is quiet, it doesn't scream, but it also doesn't stop. And over time, a man who lives with that signal long enough starts to build his identity from the inside out instead. He stops looking for a group to reflect himself back. He starts looking for what actually holds up when the group isn't there. That's a different kind of construction. It's slower, it's more solitary. It doesn't come with the same social rewards. You don't get a team. You don't get the warmth of easy belonging. But what you do get is a self that doesn't collapse when the room clears out. You know who you are when nobody's watching. That's not a small thing. Most men spend their whole lives never building that. And there's something else worth saying here. The man who never felt like he belonged usually became a more precise version of himself because of it. When you can't rely on a group to tell you who you are, you have to figure it out on your own terms. That's not comfortable. It's not fast. But what comes out the other side is a self that wasn't handed to you. You built it from what actually held up under pressure, what you actually believed when no one was watching, what you kept coming back to when the noise settled down. Most men never have to do that work. Their identity comes pre-assembled from the groups they belong to. Yours didn't. So you did it the hard way, and the hard way turned out to be the only way that actually stuck. The clinical language for some of this is differentiation, the degree to which a person can maintain a defined sense of self inside a relationship system without either fusing into it or cutting off from it. Highly differentiated people can be present in a group without being absorbed by it. They can hold their own perspective without needing the group to validate it. And they can tolerate the discomfort of not being fully understood without interpreting that discomfort as evidence that something is wrong with them. That's exactly what you learned to do. Not because someone taught you, because you had to. The rooms kept not fitting, and you kept staying anyway. And eventually you stopped requiring the fit in order to function. You still show up. You're not someone who runs from things. You go to the dinners, you take the calls, you sit in the meetings. But there's a part of you that's always slightly apart from it. Watching, measuring, deciding how much of yourself is actually required here. That never turned off. And you stopped expecting it to. What most people called your aloofness was actually precision. You weren't withholding yourself from the room. You were allocating yourself accurately. There's a difference. Withholding is fear-based. It's about self-protection. It's defensive. What you were doing was more like calibration. You were watching the room, reading what it was actually asking of you, deciding how much of yourself was appropriate to bring into it. That's not avoidance. That's judgment. The man who never felt like he belonged learned something early that most men never learn at all. Belonging doesn't always mean fitting. Sometimes it means being clear enough about who you are that you stop confusing discomfort with wrongness. The room wasn't always wrong, but it also wasn't always right. And knowing the difference without requiring someone else to confirm it, that's the thing you built. You've probably spent more time alone than most men your age are comfortable admitting to. Not isolated, not cut off, but genuinely alone with yourself in a way that most people avoid. And somewhere in all of that, you figured out something important. You're not waiting for a room that finally fits. You stopped waiting for that a while ago. What you're doing now is building something with what you actually have, on the terms that actually make sense to you. That's not a consolation. That's a different kind of construction entirely. Most men who felt this way as younger men spent years treating it as a deficit, something to fix, something to overcome. They chased groups harder, performed louder, tried to want what the room was offering, and some of them got pretty good at it. But the signal didn't stop for them either. It just got buried under enough noise that they could mostly ignore it. You didn't do that, or you tried, and at some point you stopped, because the cost of maintaining the performance got higher than the benefit of the belonging it bought. That's a real calculation. It's not cynicism, it's not bitterness. It's an honest accounting of what something costs and what it actually gives you back. You ran those numbers, and you made a decision. You were never someone who needed the room to love you back in order to stay in it. You stayed when you needed to. You contributed what you had to offer, and when the room no longer made sense, you left without requiring permission. That's not a wound. That's a pattern that took years to build. You didn't belong to most of the rooms you've been in, but you belong to yourself. And for a man like you, that turned out to be enough.